Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're super thrilled to see such a great turnout for today's webinar, Disrupting Plagiarism, Empowering Students in the Formative Space. So we're really excited to show you some of Turnitin's latest tools and resources that are really going to help you to, approach academic integrity in kind of a formative way, right? And this is really done by empowering students with learning opportunities for reflection and revision throughout the writing process, which is ultimately going to help you to really transform plagiarism into teachable moments. So my name is Andy Miller. I work on the product marketing team here at Turnitin, and I will be your host today. And today I'm joined by Senior Instructional Innovation Specialist, Katie White, who's part of the Teaching and Learning Innovations team here at Turnitin. So this is a really important team at Turnitin. It's composed of veteran educators, and they're really responsible for, producing all of the educational content within Turnitin's products. And they also create these really great instructional resources and resources that students can use alongside our products to get even more value outside of our solution. So Katie was the mastermind behind our newest set of instructional resources, which we will be reviewing with you all today. So super happy that she was able to join us and lead today's discussion. So a couple housekeeping items before we get started. During today's webinar, all lines will be muted. But with that said, we really do encourage your participation throughout today's discussion. So the best way to do that is to submit your questions in the Q&A box. You'll see a little screenshot on the slide there. It's also going to be at the very bottom of your Zoom interface. So feel free to submit your questions anytime throughout today's webinar. We'll be sure to leave some time to answer all of your questions at the end. Also feel free to chat among the attendees using the chat box as well at the bottom of your Zoom interface. And then finally, today's webinar will be recorded. So we'll be sending out the recording 24 to 48 hours from now. So feel free to share that around with your colleagues who were not able to join us live today. And then finally, so most of you are probably familiar with Turnitin, but for those of you who are not, really like our guiding North Star or our mission is really about ensuring the integrity of global education and research. Yeah, so again, very happy to have you guys all here today. And now I'll kick it over to Katie to start our discussion.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. Like Andy said, my name is Katie White. I am a veteran middle school and high school teacher here on the East Coast in the United States. And currently, I am a Senior Instructional Innovation Specialist on the Teaching and Learning Innovations team here at Turnitin. And Andy told you a little bit about what we do on our team. Throughout my entire career, though, both when I was in the classroom and while I've been here at Turnitin, I've had a really strong interest in advocating for more time spent in the formative space in all things that we study. So I'm really excited to get to discuss that more with you today. So I want to take a look at our agenda so you can see what we're up for, and then we'll jump right in because I think you can see we have a lot to talk about. So first of all, we're going to frame the context a little bit, and I want to talk just shortly about the history of where the concern for academic integrity has been historically and also where it's presently at. We're going to look at the impact that formative feedback can have in this area, how we can address student integrity throughout the entire writing process, how to make that happen effectively, because we know we can probably do it, but can we do it really well? And then finally, resources that we have that can help you in this effort. And then, like Andy mentioned, we will have some time at the end for any questions that you have throughout the webinar. So let's get started. So academic integrity has long been an area of concern for many educational institutions, both secondary and higher ed, and in some cases, primary as well. The International Center for Academic Integrity, also known as the ICAI, has stated before that many teachers, students, and administrators really embrace the principles of academic integrity because they know that the goals of teaching and learning and research can only be accomplished in environments in which ethical standards are upheld. We know that it's important. They continue to say, though, that it's rare for scholarly institutions to identify and describe their commitment to those principles in terms that are positive and practical. Instead, what's more common is to find the subject of academic integrity addressed by identifying and prohibiting behaviors that run counter to those principles of integrity. And I think that's really true in a lot of cases. If you look up academic integrity policies for just about any institution, it's likely that what you will find, like the ICAI suggests, is a list of undesirable behaviors and then consequences when those behaviors are exhibited. But very rarely do we actually see the evidence of the positive and practical things that are being done to empower students and prevent plagiarism before it exists. Now, that's not to say that those things aren't happening, but it's more to say that we don't see those things recorded quite as often. Now, when we talk about preventing plagiarism, that implies that those efforts are occurring before and during a student's writing process. And those things tend to focus on things like having students read and sign an honor code, maybe providing some small amounts of direct instruction to students about the topic of plagiarism and academic integrity, addressing citation requirements in the syllabus or in your assignment details, or maybe even referring students to Similarity data from previous assignments that they've completed. Now, as students get older, we tend to assume that they have already been instructed in all of those areas. They should know it and be able to do it. But then what we often see is we spend less time addressing those items up front beyond including a few statements in our syllabi. Then what we normally see at that point is where the investigation of issues happen after the fact. Now, all of those strategies are definitely important, and I'm going to say they should arguably remain in place. But my question for you today is, what are students missing when academic integrity is primarily addressed as a summative aspect of an assignment? Are we setting our students up for inevitable failure when we continually approach academic integrity as something that we investigate after they've turned their work in, rather than something that is of concern throughout the entire work process? And that's a question I want you to think about as we're discussing the rest of our content today. Now, one key way to address those specific concerns is through the use of formative feedback, or probably even more generally, meeting students purposefully in the formative space. Now, before we get too much further, I want to make sure that we're speaking the same language here and referencing feedback, summative, and formative all in the same way. So as you can see here, feedback is any information about how one is doing in an effort to reach a goal. And today we're talking specifically about our students. So we're looking at feedback in terms of how our students are doing in an effort to reach their educational goals. Now, I've been using the terms summative and formative, which are very common in the education space, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, summative feedback normally occurs at the end of study with no opportunity to revise. So this is something that students receive after they've turned their work in. Maybe it will take a few days, a few weeks, depending on the size of the assignment. And what they receive back is some feedback that we hope they transfer and use moving forward, but they can't really go back and fix their mistakes and revise based on that feedback. Now, formative feedback is that ongoing feedback that encourages revision based on the understandings from the feedback. Now, one other thing I want to address before we move forward. Feedback does not have to be written comments from the instructor. That's a common understanding of the term, but I think that what happens is that really limits the wide range of data and information that students are able to consume regarding their work that can help to inform those revisions and improvements that we want to see as educators. As Dr. John Hattie poses in his seminal work, Visible Learning, an integral question for us to consider when we're thinking about the feedback that we provide our students as instructors and that our students receive from other areas is, does that feedback help our students understand what they don't know, what they do know, and then maybe most importantly, where to go next? The feedback that students receive, whether that is from teachers, from peers, from tools, all of that feedback should help our students understand where to next. That part is so important for any chance of making progress in their work. And when we use this feedback from all of the sources it could come from in this formative space while they're working, there are so many more opportunities for our students to learn important lessons about the work that they are doing and the academic integrity and authenticity of the work that they're completing for us. Using the formative space and the feedback that is provided during that space, within that space, opens up so many more really impactful, teachable moments that can help our students learn and grow in some really meaningful ways. So what can we do to address our students' integrity throughout that work process? We know it's a great thing to talk about. It sounds like a great idea, but what can we do to make that happen? So I'm going to come back to the ICAI again, the International Center for Academic Integrity, and they suggest that scholarly communities flourish most when community members, so instructors, administrators, students, anyone else involved in that educational space, when those members live the fundamental values. And they suggest that those values are honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, and courage. Now, students can and should play a very key role in owning their own academic integrity. And in order to do that, everyone in the community must make the shift from simply recognizing that academic integrity is a thing to truly living those values that embody academic integrity. And that's a lot. Living and really owning the values. Until we're able to do that, students and instructors alike, academic integrity is not going to be a thing that's taken as seriously as we hope it is. Now, one way to make this shift to really living those values is to empower our students to take ownership of their integrity and their authenticity while they work. This means spending more time in the formative space, which is what we're here to discuss today. So working with students as they draft to understand how the words that they use, where those words come from, and how they use those words all have an impact on the final product, as well as what they can learn from it. When our students have the opportunity to review feedback, remember from any of those sources that we discussed, when they have the opportunity to review that feedback on their work and revise based on that feedback prior to submitting their assignments for final assessment, the benefits to student learning are huge. Students have the time to reflect on where they might have gone wrong and how they can make the appropriate changes to improve. Now, this extended time in the drafting space can give our students those opportunities to really process new knowledge and skills that are necessary to make those changes effectively. Now, that's a lot, and what it really requires of us is to start to reframe what happens when we're together with our students. And here's the big question: how do we make that happen effectively? Because like we said, it's great to talk about it and it sounds wonderful, but how do we do it so that it's effective and meaningful and our students are actually getting what we hope they're getting from it? So creating this environment that fosters integrity and authenticity, it's going to take work, absolutely. Providing our students with that information and those opportunities to do their best work is not a small commitment in the least, but it can arm our students with the tools that they need to really succeed. And truthfully, I want you to think about the benefits to you as the instructor as well. Seeing students work throughout the entire drafting process can enable you as the instructor to have more confidence that students are not falling prey to copy and paste plagiarism or purchasing pre-written assignments from the internet. This approach also will reiterate to your students that the work that they do is a process and there's something to be learned at every step of that process. So is there a way to make that work, that hard work, more accessible though? This can most effectively happen when we spend focused time on student drafting and having important discussions about the work that our students are doing while they are doing it. So when we pair this more monitored work time with data, with ongoing feedback, with student reflection, and the time to revise based on those things, we're going to see drastic impacts in what our students are able to create for us. Having this wealth of data and information at their fingertips can truly arm our students with that knowledge that they need to make informed decisions themselves about their own work. And when we pair that with the time that they need to actually do something with the data and the feedback that they receive, the lessons that they can learn from that and apply directly to the work that they're doing in the moment is huge. And that's not something that we see very often in more traditional feedback loops that return feedback to students like days and weeks after they've turned in their work. It's harder for them to apply that feedback directly to that assignment, and we're asking them then to just transfer it forward, which we know doesn't always end very successfully in most cases. So this more formative approach allows teachers to teach and reteach concepts also that appear to be issues the moment that they occur, rather than addressing them after the fact, when students are less likely to internalize them and connect them to their new knowledge and their actual work. And if integrity at this point, if their academic integrity is still an issue, I want you to think about how confident you can feel about having those difficult discussions and handling the issues more directly. Because what you'll have now is more data and more anecdotal evidence that you can use to fuel your discussion for what you've done as an educator, what your student has done or not done, and then maybe what the next steps should be. So ultimately though, what we're looking for is getting away from that gotcha climate of plagiarism prevention, right? Instead, what we really want to do is we want to use the data and the information that we can glean from helpful tools to better inform our conversations with students so that they can make better choices about the work that they're doing. Now, before we go much further, I know what you're thinking, so I'm just gonna bring it up. I'm gonna be very honest about it. Time, yes, this absolutely will take a ton of time. But here is where I encourage you to consider the breadth versus depth discussion in your classroom. What exactly are your goals for your students? I know we have standards and objectives that we have to meet, absolutely. But what are your goals for your students? Think clearly about those goals and objectives that you have in place when you're considering how much time you're willing to devote to empowering your students in their integrity and authenticity. Because truthfully, some of the very best lessons that can be learned are going to happen in this formative space. Very often we trust or maybe even assume that someone else has covered the topic of academic integrity in detail. And then inevitably, we hear our students say, I've never heard this before. I don't know what plagiarism is. And you know that's not true because you know your colleagues have covered it to some extent, but maybe not as in-depth as is necessary for your students to really live those values like the ICAI suggests. So the hard truth here is that someone has to do it and do it well for integrity and authenticity to stick. Because if we continue the approach where student integrity is a one-time discussion, we sign an honor code in the beginning of the year, and then I investigate issues of plagiarism once my students have turned in their work, my students are never going to fully take ownership of their academic integrity if I continue in that route. So that is huge and daunting, and I know we've covered so much already, and it probably feels a little overwhelming, but the really important thing here is that I want you to know you absolutely do not have to tackle this on your own. There are tools and there are resources that are available to help make this specific process easier and more effective for both you and your students. And I want to encourage you to use those tools and resources. Use them, because what that will do for you is free up some time so you can then hone in on issues and concerns that do require your expertise as an educator. There are things that a computer can do for us, and we should let that happen. We should use those tools to our advantage. But there are absolutely things that an educator is needed for, right? Our educator expertise is so necessary in so many places. So I encourage you to use the tools and resources that are available to you, so then you have that time and that space to really hone in on things that need your expertise and your attention. Now, the reason that I think we're here, and I'm super excited, Turnitin has brand new tools and resources for this purpose. And I am so excited and honored to be the one that gets to share them with you today. So I won't make you wait any longer. Let's jump right into them. I'm going to start with our newest instructional pack. This is an instructional pack that was developed by my team. We're a team of veteran educators here at Turnitin. We have a few other instructional packs that we've created in the past, and this is our newest version. We're calling it Disrupting Plagiarism, Building a Culture of Academic Honesty. So really focusing in on all of those things that we've been discussing. That formative approach to maintaining academic integrity and addressing plagiarism meaningfully when it occurs in your classrooms. And what you can see here is a small snapshot of that page, which I'll give you the link to in just a bit. So this new set of resources offers over 20 student and instructor focused resources that can be used in K-12 and higher ed settings. We were very, very purposeful in making sure that these are applicable across all levels. And teachers, you can use this set as a whole, or you can pick and choose the resources that fit best into your curriculum. All of the resources have been organized by when we felt they fit most usefully in a student's writing process. So we have before, during, and after the writing process, but I'm going to say, please use them however you see fit. If they fit in a different way into your curriculum, make it work for you. Now, in our before writing section, where we've organized a few resources that fit best before our students have started their writing process. We have a teacher guide, which is where I would suggest you start looking at these resources. What this teacher guide does is lays out all of the resources and provides some suggestions for their use and how they can use together as well. We also have posters, handouts, lesson presentations that are like PowerPoint slides that can be used in a classroom, or you can send them directly to your students for individual instruction, guided notes that go along with those lesson presentations. And all of those things are going to help you address the concept of plagiarism with your students. We focus on the 10 different types of plagiarism as outlined in Turnitin's Plagiarism Spectrum 1.0. And we address ways that students can effectively work to avoid plagiarism in their own work. And what you can see here is on the left-hand side, that's a snapshot of our poster, which is also available in a white background, because I know that's a little easier to print. And then on the right-hand side is our student handout. And that handout aligns directly to the poster, which aligns directly to the lesson presentation and the guided notes. Everything is really tied together very tightly so that all of these pieces are communicating a really strong message to your students. Now, during the writing process, your students need different types of support. So what we've included in this section, we have a lesson presentation that discusses different research strategies so that your students can start to determine what works best for them, because we know not all strategies work for all of our students. We also have research planning worksheets, which you can see here on the right, that can help your students keep track of and organize their research process a little bit more meaningfully while they're in that stage. It's also really important during this part of the writing process to check in with your students. So what we have is a mid-work check-in worksheet that will allow your students to give you kind of a progress report. Where are they right now? Are they struggling with anything? Do they need your help and attention on anything? And this is going to help you keep tabs on where they are and how they're progressing toward their goals. And then finally, until we can get our students to a place where ownership of their integrity is a continual thing, we need to make sure that we are still supporting them after the writing process has concluded. Now, normally in this space, like we've mentioned, we often police plagiarism here. But with these resources, what we want to do is facilitate better conversations with our students and try to usher them to a place where they can reflect on their work and learn from those mistakes. So we have Turnitin users, I think you're going to be excited about this one, a long-awaited set of handouts, guides. We have a student and instructor-facing guide to the Turnitin Similarity Report. So what this can do is give both your students and yourself a little bit more in-depth look at that Turnitin Similarity Report, what the score means, how to use it, how to have conversations together based on that information, and especially for our students, what to do next, right? Looking back at that question from Dr. Hattie, where do I go next? I know my score is a 41. What does that mean and what do I do with it now? So these guides, we're really excited about being able to offer these to you. Just really a great way to help both you and your students interpret that similarity score and find ways to move forward using that information meaningfully. We also have quick mark sets that can be used in Feedback Studio. We have quite a few conversation guides and activity guides to help you hold those difficult discussions, difficult conversations when academic integrity is an issue. Hold those discussions more effectively and meaningfully. And we also have metacognitive worksheets that will help your students be more reflective on their processes and products. Now, of special note, I'm really excited about this aspect given the nature of education as it is at the moment. All of these worksheets included in this pack of resources have been created as fillable PDFs. So what that means is that your students, upon opening the file, they can type directly into the worksheet, save it, and then submit it to you via email or whatever other messaging system that you may use. So it makes it a little bit more streamlined for both students and instructors. And we're hoping that this functionality will help you use those worksheets more meaningfully, whether you're in person with your students or working remotely with them this year. You have immediate access to all of these resources by visiting this website, turnitin.com/resources/disrupting-plagiarism. These resources are 100% free for everyone, whether you're a Turnitin user or not. So what that means is that I'm going to encourage you to use them, but I'm also going to encourage you to share them with your colleagues and your friends. And while I spoke quite often about the writing process here, these resources truthfully are applicable in just about any discipline where academic integrity is an area of concern, and they can be used by all teachers in all of those classrooms as well. So lots of different use cases for all of these resources. And we plan to continue to add more resources to this list over the course of the school year. So please check back regularly to find any new pieces that you can use with your students. So that's a lot, and there's still more. I feel like infomercial, but wait, there's more, right? So we also at Turnitin have a brand new tool that we're so excited about that can help you foster an environment of integrity and authenticity in your classroom and can help make the feedback and revision processes easier for both you and your students. So what you're seeing here is a quick snapshot of Turnitin Draft Coach, a new Google Docs add-on. And this add-on allows students to access Turnitin's trusted Similarity report, as well as new citation checking technology during their drafting process right in Google Docs, where many of your students may be doing their work. So very exciting that we have this new space where they can get some data and feedback directly in that formative area where they're working. So the Draft Coach Similarity Check feature uses the same similarity check functionality that you know and love from our other Turnitin products. In this space, students are going to be able to draft their work. Like I said, they can type directly into Google Docs like we already know they can, and then they can check their similarity as they go, or maybe at the end of their drafting stage to see where they're at, to see maybe if they're not quoting things effectively, or they've summarized or paraphrased too closely, and they need to work on those areas a little bit more. So students have access to 3 similarity checks per document. And we have that limit to encourage purposeful and meaningful use of these checks. But I will say that if you find that further checks are instructionally necessary, what students can always do is open a new copy of that document, and they can continue utilizing the similarity check function in that new copy. So providing this data from the similarity report to students in this space as they are drafting allows them the time and the data to investigate on their own where and when they might have made some errors. Because in many cases, it's not necessarily a bad faith effort. We don't see all the time that students are plagiarizing because it was purposeful. A lot of times it's a skill deficiency and they need some time to work through those issues. So this type of formative work on their integrity and on their authenticity can help our students feel really empowered in their ownership of those aspects of their education. And what we're ultimately going to see is better results, better products from our students that in the end demonstrate more accurately what they know and what they can do. The second functionality in Draft Coach is the citations check. And this is a brand new feature for our Turnitin products. In this function, students can run a check to help them identify when any of their citations or references in their bibliographic material are missing their match. So in this feature, students have access to unlimited checks to help them really finesse their in-text citations and works cited information. In this space though, what you're going to find are issues are identified and inform students whether they have a citation that's missing a reference or a reference in the bibliographic list in their works cited that might be missing an in-text citation, because we know those two pieces always need their partner. And our teams here at Turnitin are actively working on improvements and expansions in this space in particular. So further functionality is definitely possible in the future, which we're really excited about. So the Draft Coach is currently available in an open beta testing program to help us prepare to make this really great new tool available for all of our users. Access right now is available for Turnitin Originality and Feedback Studio with Originality users. Around October, sometime around October, Draft Coach should be available to all of our Turnitin users, which is really, really exciting. If you're interested in gaining access to Draft Coach for Google Docs, you can visit this website here, turnitin.com/products/features/draft-coach, or you can contact your Turnitin sales rep or whoever you speak to here at Turnitin, and they can help you get set up as well. So much new and really exciting tools and resources here at Turnitin, but the thing I think I'm most excited about is how they can team up. There are so many ways that you can use parts or all of the resources from the Disrupting Plagiarism pack and Draft Coach together. And I encourage you to really start to think about how you might be able to use all of these new tools and resources within your classroom and tailor them to fit your classroom's needs. I'm going to talk through one possible scenario of how I might use these in my classroom, just to kind of get your wheels spinning, but this by no means is prescriptive in how it has to be done. I think there are a lot of ways that you can combine these resources and Draft Coach to be really effective for your students. So play with it and find what works best for you. So one possible scenario, like I had mentioned, something that I might do in my classroom, I would start by explicitly and consistently instructing my students on the concepts of plagiarism and academic integrity, because we said that's where it has to start. If you're not explicit from the beginning, they're never going to truly understand those concepts. I would provide guided practice on identifying issues and writing their own work to best avoid plagiarism. To do all of this, I would use the plagiarism lesson from the Disrupting Plagiarism pack. I would use the guided notes, which keep my students actively engaged in that lesson. And I would use the Avoiding Plagiarism handout and poster here. Like I said before, those all tie together really nicely. Then when it's time for my students to actually start writing their, working on their assignment, I would have my students draft in Google Docs, and I would ask them to use the data from Draft Coach, Similarity Report, and Citations Check to keep tabs on their progress, both for their benefit and for mine. Asking them to think about how they can use that information from Draft Coach to inform the revisions that they need to make. And it also will allow me to see, are there areas where they're struggling so much that I need to reteach a concept or maybe teach it from the beginning. I can supplement this process with resources from the Disrupting Plagiarism pack when I find it's necessary. And I can also use those resources to check in with my students as they work. And then finally, after students have completed their work and turned it in via Turnitin, I can use the remainder of the Disrupting Plagiarism resources to really effectively and meaningfully conference with my students about any work that is of concern or things that we want to praise that they've done really well with their academic integrity. There are activities that address all of those areas. And I can use those resources to really have a great conversation with my students about how to move them forward and how to transfer all of that new knowledge to our next assignments and all their other classes as well. So the most important thing to remember here is that we are actively working with our students as they move through their work process. We're allies in this process with them in this formative space. We're not waiting until they turn in a final copy of their work to just begin that conversation. When you can effectively and meaningfully employ resources and tools to help you throughout this formative process, you're going to find that it's worthwhile for everyone involved. So that was so much, and I'm really hopeful that you're as excited as we are here at Turnitin. And now I'm going to ask Andy to jump back on with me so we can address any questions that you've had throughout the webinar.
Great, great. Thanks so much, Katie. That was really wonderful. We have obviously a lot of questions coming through around Draft Coach, which I'm answering now. Basically, I'll put the link in the chat box, and it has all the information for our open beta, which is just kicking off. And then, as Katie said, we will open this up to all customers, in the October timeframe. But one question I did have for you, Katie. So really loved all the resources you reviewed today. How can these resources and tools be used effectively in a remote or hybrid environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know most of you are probably dealing with a different type of school this year. You might be fully remote. You might be in a hybrid situation where you're seeing your students once or twice a week, or you might be fully in person with your students. These tools and resources, we really tried very purposefully to make them applicable no matter what your situation is. Like I said, all of the resources can be printed out easily and used in person with your students. They're files that are easily shareable if you are using an LMS, or if you are, emailing things to your students. However you share your information with your students in a remote or a hybrid setting, everything is very easily shareable online, digitally, and students have the ability to type directly into a lot of those resources. So there's no worrying about printing something out. Do they have access to a printer? Can they scan it back in? Anything like that. So there's a lot of great opportunities there just functionally. But I think furthermore, beyond that, what's really great about the resources and Draft Coach is that students, it allows them to work a little bit more individually with your advisement of that process though. So students can use those resources individually. You can use them as a whole group setting, as a small group setting. The possibilities are really limitless there, and they still provide though some space for you to check in with your students to make sure they're on the right track. And the same goes for Draft Coach. Your students are individually getting personalized feedback based on what they have done, right? Because my score might not be the same as Andy's score. So we're going to see some different things there in terms of what we need to focus on. And that really will drive that individualized instruction that we're looking for in all types of instruction, and whether we're remote or hybrid or in person. And I think So I think to sum up, everything there can be used in any way that you see fit. And hopefully they function really well in all of those spaces. And if you find that you have suggestions for how to make it better, we would always love to hear them. So just let us know as well.
Great, thanks for that, Katie. So yeah, there's quite a few questions coming through with Draft Coach. And so in the follow-up email that I'll be sending out to all of you in the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll have more information on the open beta. And we also have a landing page around Draft Coach, which I'll post in the chat box right now. But really the best way to get access to that open beta is to talk with your account manager. As Katie said, the beta will only be available for Turnitin Originality, which is our new solution we recently launched, as well as Feedback Studio with Originality to start. And then again, in the October timeframe, we will expand it to our larger set of products. So if you want to learn more about Originality or the Draft Coach beta, be sure to take a look at that follow-up or that email that I'll be sending up with the product or with the webinar recording, and we'll answer all of your questions around Draft Coach. But yeah, I think if there's any other final questions, please input them now. But I just really want to take the time to thank Katie for a very insightful, great webinar today. And we really hope that you all, take the time to check out all those great resources and start using them in your classrooms and with your students, as soon as possible. And yes, we do have a couple things. Can we get a recording of the webinar? Again, that will be sent out in the follow-up email in the next 24 to 48 hours. Just doing a little scan here. People are just saying what a great session this was. Really appreciate the resources. So yeah, we also really appreciate all of your time today. Thank you so much for joining. We hope you found the conversation, insightful and very valuable. And we hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.